good to see the ball go through the net. But I think, every game, regardless, you're making shots, you're not, it feels really, really good to have your teammates behind you.
You know that moment in sports when one quiet comment flips everything upside down, when a simple sentence suddenly exposes a story nobody saw coming. That is exactly what happened the day Lexie Hull opened up and said, "It feels really good when the ball goes through the net, but honestly, what matters most is having your teammates behind you." On the surface, it sounded harmless, almost routine. But to those paying attention, it was the first spark in a wildfire that would spread across the entire basketball community. Because what Lexie said next, and what she revealed about Caitlin Clark, completely changed the narrative. Fans had always looked at Clark through a certain lens: the unstoppable sharpshooter, the face of the future, the rookies who walked into the WNBA with more hype than any player in modern history. But no one expected Lexie, one of her own teammates, to pull back the curtain and expose the emotional engine that had been driving everything behind the scenes. Before social media lit up, before analysts scrambled to dissect every detail, there was just Lexie sitting in that interview chair, her voice steady, her eyes serious, revealing things that made even longtime basketball insiders pause. She talked about pressure. She talked about identity. She talked about how winning or losing never told the full story of what was happening inside the Indiana Fever locker room. And she talked about Caitlin Clark in a way that no teammate ever had before. Lexie made it clear this was not just about basketball. It was about transformation, leadership, and the brutal reality of chasing greatness in a league where every player was once a star. She admitted that early in her career, she felt lost, overshadowed, and drifting. Fans had no idea how heavy that silence felt. They only saw the stat sheets, the minutes played, the missed opportunities. They never saw the mental battle happening underneath it all. Then she spoke about Caitlin's arrival, and everything changed. The honesty in Lexie's words shifted the conversation in a way nobody expected. Suddenly, the basketball world was buzzing, asking one question: what was really going on inside the Fever? And why did Lexie sound so emotional when she talked about Clark? Because behind those comments was a story of pressure, conflict, and raw determination. A story of two players whose paths collided at exactly the right moment, creating one of the most fascinating dynamics in modern women's basketball. From the outside, it looked like a team gaining a superstar. But from the inside, it was something much bigger: a culture war, a test of identity, a moment that would either break the Fever forever or finally rebuild them into something unstoppable. And according to Lexie Hull, that moment began long before the cameras showed up. It began the second Caitlin Clark walked through the door, long before the public noticed anything unusual, long before the viral clips and heated debates. Something subtle had already been building inside the Indiana Fever. Players were adjusting, coaches were scrambling, and expectations were rising faster than anyone could control. When Caitlin Clark arrived, she did not just join the team, she reshaped it. Every practice, every drill, every shot she took sent a message. This was not the same Fever anymore. There was a new standard now, and everyone felt it. For Lexie Hull, this shift hit hardest. She had fought her way into the league with grit, discipline, and endless work in the shadows. Nothing came easy to her. She was the kind of player who had to earn everything. Suddenly, she was sharing the floor with a rookie who carried the weight of an entire sport on her shoulders. The cameras followed Caitlin. The microphones followed Caitlin. The critics followed Caitlin. And, without saying a word, the pressure wrapped itself around every player in that locker room. Lexie admitted that at first, she struggled to understand her place. She had always been known for defense and hustle, but next to Caitlin's explosive offense, she sometimes felt invisible. Fans were asking why certain players were losing minutes. Analysts were comparing roles and rotations. And inside the team, it became clear that if the Fever wanted to rise, they needed to blend two worlds: veterans who understood the grind, and a young star who played with a fire no one could ignore. Early practices became emotional battlegrounds. Caitlin pushed the pace. Lexie pushed back with relentless intensity. Little things started to matter more than ever. A missed box out, a late rotation, a sloppy screen. Every detail felt magnified because the Fever knew the entire world was watching. Even Caitlin felt the burn of it. She wanted to lead, But leadership in the WNBA is earned, not handed out. What fans did not see were those moments after practice when Lexie would stay behind, repeating the same shot over and over until the gym lights flickered. They did not see Caitlin quietly walk over and rebound for her, saying nothing, but showing everything. A simple gesture, yet it carried a message. They were not rivals. They were teammates learning how to breathe inside the same storm. Slowly, something unexpected began to form between them. A mutual respect built through sweat, frustration, and honesty. Lexie started to see Caitlin not as a threat, but as someone who challenged her to rediscover her own game. And Caitlin started to see Lexie not as another name on the roster, but as the emotional anchor the team desperately needed. Behind every great team is a story no one talks about. For the Fever, that story was two players learning how to trust each other, even when everything around them felt like a test. They were still far from perfect. The tension was still there. But for the first time, the foundation of something real had begun to form. There are days that feel ordinary until one detail, one reaction, one silence turns them into something unforgettable. For the Fever, that moment arrived during a mid-season practice, a session that was never meant to make headlines, yet became the turning point no one saw coming. The team was exhausted, running the same sets again and again, trying to fix the mistakes that had haunted them since opening night. The gym felt heavy, the air thick with frustration. Even the sound of the ball hitting the hardwood felt sharper than usual. Caitlin Clark was pushing hard that day, maybe too hard. She had been carrying the weight of expectations all season, and every missed shot, every turnover felt like a personal failure. Lexie could see it. She had seen that look in her own reflection once, the look of someone trying to prove a point to everyone in the world. But on that day, the pressure finally cracked through the surface. During one drill, a miscommunication led to a broken play. Lexie cut to the wing, expecting the pass. Caitlin fired the ball to the corner, expecting Lexie to spot up. The ball sailed out of bounds and slammed against the wall. The gym froze. No one spoke. No one moved. It was the kind of moment that exposes everything that has been building underneath. Caitlin let out a breath, sharp and frustrated. Lexie stiffened, feeling the eyes of the entire team shift toward her. She knew this was more than a bad pass. This was the boiling point of weeks of unspoken tension. The coaches tried to reset the play, but the energy had already shifted. Something needed to break, and it did. Lexie stepped toward Caitlin. Her tone was calm, but her eyes held a mix of disappointment and honesty. She told her, if we are going to do this, if we are going to survive this season, then we cannot fall apart over mistakes. We have to communicate. We have to trust each other. And you cannot carry this alone. The room went silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Caitlin looked at her, not as a teammate questioning her, but as someone finally understanding the pressure she had been creating for herself and the weight she had unknowingly placed on others. It was the first real moment of vulnerability between them, and it cracked open the door to something deeper. Practice continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The passes became smoother, communication louder, and for the first time, the Fever started to look like they were playing for each other instead of playing to survive. What happened in that moment stayed inside the gym, at least for a while, but it became the catalyst for everything that followed. Great teams are not built on wins. They are built on moments like this, raw and unfiltered, when players choose honesty over comfort and unity over ego. That day, the Fever took their first step toward becoming a real team. What happened next inside the Fever locker room would never make it to television. Cameras were off, music was low, and the air felt heavy enough to cut. This was the moment when the growing tension finally snapped, not in the form of screaming or thrown objects, but in something far more painful, the truth. Caitlin walked in late after extra shooting practice, still carrying the frustration of another game where she felt she was playing with a weight on her chest. She dropped her bag and froze. The room was too quiet, not peaceful quiet, but the kind that feels like everyone stopped talking the second you entered. Lexie was tying her shoes, Alyssa was scrolling her phone, and Alyssa was sitting with her arms folded. Nobody looked up. Nobody greeted her. That silence hit harder than any elbow on the court. Caitlin sat on the bench and exhaled, then said the words that had been burning inside her for weeks. She said she felt like she was fighting alone, that every mistake she made became a headline, that every win still felt like a loss because the chemistry around her was cracking. Her voice shook, and for a brief moment she looked less like the unstoppable rookie phenom, and more like a young player who simply needed her team to have her back. Lexie could not hold it in anymore. She stood, her voice rising with a mixture of hurt and exhaustion. She said Caitlin was not the only one under pressure, that the rest of the team was drowning in criticism too, that every bad pass or missed shot turned into fans accusing them of dragging Caitlin down. She said nobody hated her, nobody wanted to undermine her, but it felt like the world treated the rest of the Fever as props in the Caitlin Clark show. The room went still. Caitlin looked stunned, not defensive, not angry, just stunned. She said she never wanted that, never asked for that, never wanted anyone to feel overshadowed. She said she respected all of them, that her success meant nothing if they were miserable standing next to her. This was the moment where frustration met honesty, not friends becoming enemies, but something that felt deeper, rawer. Teammates facing the truth they had been avoiding. Alyssa finally spoke, calm, steady, tired. She said everyone needed to stop pretending everything was fine, that the pressure, the hype, the expectations were crushing all of them. She said they had a choice, either fall apart or face the storm together. For the first time, Caitlin nodded without speaking. Lexie sat down slowly, her anger replaced by a quiet sadness. No one apologized, not yet. But for the first time in weeks, they were finally telling the truth. And sometimes the truth is the real beginning of a team, not the wins, not the highlights, but the breaking point that forces everyone to admit what hurts. The next morning arrived with a strange sense of stillness. No drama, no whispers, no lingering echoes from the night before. It was a kind of quiet that follows a storm, the kind that tells you something has changed even if you cannot see it yet. Caitlin walked into practice earlier than usual, and she was surprised to find Lexie already there. No cameras, no media, just two players who had finally said what needed to be said. Lexie was stretching near the baseline, and when she looked up, their eyes met for a second that felt longer than it actually was. Not hostile, not awkward, just honest. Caitlin picked up a ball and began shooting in silence. One shot, then another. The rhythm felt calming. After a minute, Lexie walked over. She did not give a speech, she did not apologize. She just said one simple line, "I do not want us to lose each other over pressure that is not even coming from us." It was enough to break the ice. Caitlin nodded and said she never wanted the spotlight to create shadows around the people standing with her. She said she knew she was getting more attention, more criticism, more noise, but she wanted the team to feel like a team again, not a headline. The conversation was short, but it mattered. When the rest of the players arrived, there was a subtle shift. Passes were sharper, communication clearer, energy warmer. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. This was the first practice in weeks where they looked like a unit instead of a group of individuals managing their own frustrations. Coach Sides noticed it immediately. She watched how Caitlin called out screens louder, how Lexie clapped after each defensive stop, how Alyssa and Nalissa talked through rotations instead of silently judging each other. It was not perfect, but it was progress. Later that day, during a film session, something surprising happened. Caitlin acknowledged one of her mistakes before anyone else could say a word. She caught it on film, paused, and said, "That one is on me. I missed the read." The room shifted again, but this time in a better way. Players who usually stayed quiet started speaking up, not blaming, not attacking, but collaborating. For the first time, accountability did not feel like an attack. It felt like teamwork. Lexie added her own comment, calm and constructive, pointing out a spacing issue that involved all of them. The tone was different. It was not about blame, it was about fixing things together. By the end of a session, there were even a few quiet laughs, the kind that show the tension is finally starting to melt. This was the turning point, not a dramatic victory or a locker room speech that went viral, but a series of small, human moments where pride took a backseat and trust slowly returned. The Fever had been cracked, stressed, divided under pressure, but in that slow rebuilding, something stronger began to form. Something real. The next morning felt different. and not because anything magically improved overnight. It was the quiet understanding that something had shifted. The Fever walked into practice with the weight of the previous night still sitting on their shoulders. But this time it felt like shared weight instead of isolated pressure. Christy Sides watched the team closely. She was not in the locker room the night before, but she knew something had cracked open. The tension that had quietly poisoned every drill and every timeout was now out in the open, exposed for everyone to see. She gathered them at center court, her voice steady but firm, and told them that great teams are not built from talent alone. They are built from conflict, from honesty, from players who choose to stay even when it hurts. Practice began stiff, but slowly the rhythm shifted. Caitlin started communicating more clearly, her voice louder, more intentional. Lexie responded with sharper cuts, stronger closeouts, and a focus that felt renewed. Passes that once felt forced now moved with rhythm. Screens landed cleaner. Help defense rotated faster. It was not perfect, but it was progress that tasted real. Then came the moment that changed everything. During a scrimmage, Caitlin threaded a no-look pass between two defenders. It was the kind of pass only she sees, one that demands trust from the receiver. Lexie caught it in stride, rose up, and sank the shot. The gym exploded with cheers, but the biggest shift came afterward. Caitlin pointed at Lexie with a smile, and Lexie pointed back. It was small, but it carried the weight of a promise. We are in this together. From that moment on, the energy of the team changed. Alyssa began speaking more during plays, taking command of defensive rotations. Nalissa started creating better spacing to open driving lanes for Caitlin. Even the bench players, often overlooked, felt the shift and responded with louder support. The Fever finally looked like a group moving with one heartbeat instead of 5 separate ones. They were not perfect, and they still had a long road ahead, but they had crossed the hardest bridge. They had faced the storm, not as individuals, but as a team willing to rebuild the foundation from scratch. That one practice did not guarantee wins, but it gave them something they had not felt in weeks. Hope, not the fragile kind, but the kind that grows from truth, struggle, and unity forged under pressure. The kind of hope that reminds a team why they started this journey in the first place. When fans watch a team on television, they see the flashy parts. The threes, the celebrations, the highlight passes, the wins and losses. What they never see is the emotional battlefield behind the scenes. The bruises that come from pressure, the doubts that creep in at night, the misunderstandings that build up quietly until they explode. This story is not just about basketball. It is about human beings trying to survive overwhelming expectations. Caitlin Clark walked into the WNBA carrying the weight of an entire sport on her shoulders. Every camera followed her. Every mistake became national conversation. But her teammates carried something heavy too. They carried the fear of being overlooked, underestimated, and blamed for anything that went wrong. In the end, no one was the villain. Caitlin was not trying to overshadow anyone, and the team was not trying to isolate her. They were all trapped inside the same storm. The real breakthrough came when they finally stopped pretending everything was fine and started speaking the truth. That is the lesson buried inside this story. Success does not come from pretending. It comes from honesty, from admitting your fears and frustrations, from choosing to stay connected even when tension rises. The Fever became stronger not because they avoided conflict, but because they walked through it. For viewers, this story becomes a reminder that every person carries their own pressure. Every teammate, coworker, friend, or family member has a battle you may not see. Misunderstandings grow fast when communication breaks. Assumptions replace truth. People drift apart even when they need each other the most. The Fever story teaches that healing begins the moment someone speaks their truth. It teaches that strong relationships survive because someone decides to listen. Most of all, it shows that unity is not automatic. It is a choice made repeatedly, especially when things feel broken. For Caitlin, this moment was not about proving she was a superstar. It was about learning that leadership requires vulnerability. For Lexie and the others, it was a reminder that their voices matter, that their pain is valid, and that strength is not silence but honesty. This is why their journey matters. not because of a final score, but because of the bond they rebuilt, a bond shaped by struggle, truth, and the courage to face each other without masks. As the Fever walked out of the gym that evening, something felt different in the air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. And for the first time in weeks, those shadows did not feel heavy. They felt symbolic, like the end of a chapter that needed to close. Caitlin stayed back for a moment, holding the ball against her hip. She watched her teammates laugh on the way out, something she had not seen in a long time. For a brief second, she felt gratitude wash over her. Not for fame, not for hype, but for the chance to grow with the people beside her. Lexie walked by and tapped her arm lightly, then said they would run extra shooting drills together tomorrow. It was not an apology, not a grand gesture, just a simple invitation. The kind that says, we are good now. The kind that says trust is rebuilding one brick at a time. Alyssa and Nalissa waited by the door, joking about who would beat who in sprint drills the next day. The tension that once filled every space between them had finally loosened. It was not gone forever, because no team is perfect, but it no longer controlled them. This was the beginning of something new. A team that had been cracked open by pressure, now rebuilding themselves piece by piece. Their story was far from over, but this chapter taught them something priceless. That unity is not given, it is earned, protected, and fought for. As Caitlin walked out, she looked back at the silent gym, the place where their lowest moments collided with their breakthrough. She exhaled softly, not in exhaustion, but in relief. She finally understood that being a star does not mean carrying the world alone. It means lifting others while letting them lift you too. The Fever may not win every game, and they may face new conflicts ahead, but they now carry something they did not have before. A bond shaped by honesty, a renewed commitment to each other, and the courage to face whatever comes next side by side. The cameras will never show this part. The headlines will never explain it fully. But the real story of a team is written in the moments the world never sees. Moments like these, where truth becomes the turning point and unity becomes the path forward. And for the Fever, this was that moment. The moment they stopped being a group of individuals and finally became a team.